Govardhana Baba Girivardhari Yasodanandana Brajajanandana Yasodanandana Brajajanandana Samunatira Vanachari Samunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Govardhana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Govardhana Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Govardhana Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Govardhana Krishna Prabhupada Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Stotara Sadashi Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. This morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 22nd chapter, 34th verse. Is that right?
Yes.
Nishnatam Yogamayasu Munim Swayambhuvam Manum Yat Abrama Saitum Boga Na Sheku Bhagavat Param Nishnatam Yogamayashu Munim Swayambhuvam Manum Yada Brahmasitam Boga Nashekur Bhagavat Puram Nishnatam Yogamayasu Munim Swayambhuvam Manum Yada Brahmas Saitam Boga Nashekur Bhagavat Param
Nishnatam
Yogamayasu
Munim Swayambhuvam Manum
Mayam Manuspabayam Manum Mama Brayam Saitum Boga Nashekur Bhagavat Puram
Nishnatam Yogamayasu
Nashitam Yogamayasu
Munim Swayambhuvam Manum
Munim Swayambhuvam Manu Yara Brahma Saitam Boga Nashekur Bhagavat Param
Nishnatam
Yogamayasu
Munim Swayambhuvam Manum
Munim Swayambhuvam Manu
Yada Brahm Saitam Boga
Yara Brahma Saitum Boga Nashekur Bhagavat Param. Ladies, Nishnatam Yogamayashu Munim Swayambhuvam Manum Yaravam Saitam Boga Nashetur Bhagavat Param Nishnatam Yogamayashu Munim Swayambhuvam Manum Yarabam Saitum Boga Nasekur Bhagavat Puram Nishnatam absorb Yogamayasu in temporary enjoyment Munim who is equal to a saint Swayambhuvam Swayambhuva Swayambhuva Manu Yat from which Abramasaitam to cause to deviate Bogaha material enjoyments not Sekuhu were able Bhagavat Puram who was a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation. Thus Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king. Although absorbed in material happiness, he was not dragged to the lowest grade of life, for he always enjoyed his material happiness in a Krishna consciousness atmosphere. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The kingly happiness of material enjoyment generally drags one to the lowest grade of life, namely degradation to animal life, because of unrestricted sense enjoyment. But Swayambhuva Manu was considered as good as a saintly sage because the atmosphere created in his kingdom and home was completely Krishna conscious. The case is similar with the conditioned souls in general. They have come into this material life for sense gratification, but if they are able to create a Krishna conscious atmosphere, as depicted here or as prescribed in revealed scriptures, by temple worship and household deity worship, then, in spite of their material enjoyment, they can make advancement in pure Krishna consciousness without a doubt. At the present moment, modern civilization is too much attached to the material way of life or sense gratification. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement can give the people in general the best opportunity to utilize their human life in the midst of material enjoyment. Krishna consciousness does not stop them in their propensity for material enjoyment, but simply regulates their habits in the life of sense enjoyment. In spite of their enjoying the material advantages, they can be liberated in this very life by practicing Krishna consciousness by the simple method of chanting the holy names of Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Translation, again by Srila Prabhupada. Thus, Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king. Although absorbed in material happiness, he was not dragged to the lowest grade of life, for he always enjoyed his material happiness in a Krishna conscious atmosphere. Narayanam Naraskricham Naram Chaivam Narotaram Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudirayat Nasa Parayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloker Bhakti Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. When Srila Prabhupada left India, he came to the wealthiest and most powerful country in the world at that time, was the United States of America. He meditated on this destination for a long period of time. Once someone asked him, why did it take so long when you got this instruction in early 1920s from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to preach Krishna consciousness in the English-speaking language? He answered by saying, well, it was a very big task, so it took a long time. It was very unusual for holy men to come to the United States, although some had come before. Those who had come before made a little impression on a few people, but not a big impression on a lot of people. And certainly they didn't take their knowledge beyond the country that they came to. So this was part of the specific quality or specific advantage of Prabhupada in taking Krishna consciousness to the mundane world. He calculated that if he got Krishna consciousness to be made popular in the most powerful and the most influential country in the world, then the rest of the world would follow. And it did, including India, England, and many European countries, and many South American countries, many countries in Southeast Asia. They were all following the so-called example of the United States with its big skyscrapers, aeroplanes, methods of communication, and so on, and methods of medicine. So when people come to Krishna consciousness, at first they're very attracted by the music, by the friendliness, camaraderie, and by the beauty of the temple and the temple's rooms, and everything about the food and everything about it is very, very pleasing and very wonderful. But after a time, they realize that it's not that easy. Of course, there are many things to enjoy: the beauty of a temple, the music, the friendliness, the dancing, the singing, and the food. It's all very wonderful, but it gets very difficult. So there are many dark, we might say, dark elements of everything in history. There were many great empires that ceased to exist: the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the Hungarian Empire, and so on. But they don't exist anymore. And there was always a great struggle between the colonial countries. Like France used to struggle against Britain to see who could acquire the most parts of the world, the fastest and the easiest. So there's always a struggle, and the people of Holland used to try to colonize many parts of the world, including Indonesia. But they were all unsuccessful, and they only survived for a short period of time. Prabhupada writes that people who have wealth don't engage their wealth properly in the service of the Lord. And we have come to know of a few devotees who are wealthy. Some of them are publicly wealthy, some of them are privately wealthy, some of them are multi-millionaires, but we don't know about all of this because they tend to keep it a secret. There are even tax havens. I don't know if they exist anymore, but in the Cayman Islands, in Liechtenstein, where and Switzerland, where one was able to open a bank account not in one's name, but it could be numbered. So all of these little tax havens have shut down because there's been a great struggle for the governments to try to gain their tax. The struggle to gain tax has usually been successful on the part of governments. Once a person who worked for a very wealthy company that made wood and wood chips and wood dust told me that there was a great struggle for their tax representative to hide their income from the government. In order to fight this tendency, the governments offered the same people who were the people who tried to keep them from getting the corporation's money, an offer for working for 10 years with an increased salary and with increased separation money. What do they call it? When someone leaves, they give some money for separation. So there's a name for it. I can't think of it right now.
Severance?
Huh? Severance pay or something like that. So it is a very difficult thing. And these Raja Rishis of yore, who we're reading about, like Swayambhuva Manu, used to be able to violate certain elements of regulative principles. For example, they were allowed to hunt, they were allowed to drink, and they were allowed to punish people. Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit were both Raja Rishis, and they were able to punish people. Maharaj Parikshit caught someone who was belittling or torturing an animal, and he chastised him, or he rebuked him by saying, "What are you doing in my kingdom? You can't do this thing in my kingdom, so go somewhere to another kingdom." And the response was, well, there is no other kingdom. There's no other place where cow slaughter and cow protection are honored. And so Maharaj, he drew his sword. People are sometimes wondering why Raja Rishis or why devotees of Krishna are sometimes violent, but they have to be. Maharaj was doing this out of his desire to protect the citizenry. Just like in the modern day, they have jails and executions for people who are problem people who don't obey the government and who do criminal activity automatically. In some parts of the world, lying is very common and very popular. Once I was in a shop and they had advertised seedless watermelon, but they didn't have any watermelon. It didn't have seeds in it. And I asked one of the proprietors, well, why is that you're advertising in a big sign outside the shop, seedless watermelon, and you don't have any for sale? And he said, well, that's just a name, seedless watermelon. It's not really seedless, that's just a name. So some people can tell lies in such a way that it's very natural. Once someone told me that politicians are very good at this. And once someone said that a politician is a person who can tell you to go to hell in a way that you can look forward to the journey. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they say. And at one time, some deities were offered to Prabhupada for the opening of the temple in Berry Place. It was one of the early temples, probably the first temple ever in the UK. And there was a long discussion that this gentleman said he had deities that he wanted to donate. But there was a long discussion that Prabhupada went himself with a few devotees to get the deities. And I didn't know what was being said because I didn't understand their language. They were speaking in Hindi and maybe Gujarati or something like that. And what I learned later on was that the gentleman really didn't want to part with the deities then and there. He said, well, we'll fix them because there was some damage done to one of the deities. So then the conversation went along, and then it seemed to be a very stern and very serious conversation. And then at one point it turned into something very jovial. I don't know if Prabhupada told a joke or whatever, but everyone suddenly started smiling. There was the man who wanted to donate the deities, his wife, and someone else who was in charge of his center. And it emerged that deities, there was a small damage in one of the deities. I don't know, it was Radha and Krishna deities, and I think Radharani's wrist was damaged in the transit. So I don't know what happened, but somehow or other Prabhupada got the deities, even though they didn't want to give them to us. And then on the way back, Prabhupada wasn't driving, someone else was driving the car. It was actually a van. It had 3 or 4 devotees and Prabhupada and myself. And he kind of chuckled to himself and said, kind of under his breath, that he foiled the bank manager. He said, I foiled the bank manager's scheme. And I didn't know what that meant, but later on I learned that he probably wanted to get a loan, and the bank manager refused, and then he talked him into it. At the end of the conversation, he got the loan. And he kind of chuckled to himself and said that the bank manager said to him, at the end of this talk, Mr. Day, that was Prabhupada's name before he was initiated, Mr. Day, you should have been a politician. I don't know if it was before he was initiated or after he was initiated. But anyway, he got the loan, and the bank manager's scheme was foiled. So the devotees of yore, the Rajarishis, used to exact punishment when necessary to protect the populace. And for a long time, there was a great struggle between people who were very wealthy. Like there were 2 automobile companies that were in severe competition with each other, and it turned into a violent conflict. One of the companies tried to murder the head of the other company. Anyway, I don't want to say who they were, but you probably can guess. And at any rate, there was a great struggle, and the descendants of these 2 people came to Detroit, and they were in the city of Detroit, where both of these people lived, and they were descendants. One was a daughter and one was a son. And it came out as a very important and very unusual thing that people who were descendants of rivals, of very bitter rivals, would be in unison. And the factor that was unifying them was the acquisition of the Detroit temple, which had belonged to one of the automobile magnates named Fisher. So he lived in a mansion, and this mansion was long abandoned, but it had become a very important place, and it was for sale, and it was a very low amount because there was no one living there, and this baron of the auto industry was no longer living. So somehow or other, Prabhupada negotiated even a lower price than the asking price. And there was an article of these 2 descendants of the 2 rival companies sitting in front of a picture of Prabhupada, and it appeared in Newsweek magazine, one of the most popular magazines in the world, it still exists. And the rivalry was so intense that one of the rivals planted a bomb in a private airplane of one of their rivals and killed 2 people. So it was and then they fired some rifles into the home of one of the other ones, and it was a very intense situation. So this is what happens when people use their wealth for ulterior purposes. Not exactly ulterior purposes, but to get more wealth, to get more food, to get more fame, to get a better automobile, to get a better house. That's what most people's wealth is used for. And every now and then, Prabhupada writes about people who, in his part of the world where he came from, donated large sums of money to build temples. Now it's hardly done anymore, but people use their wealth for devotional purposes to build temples. There's a few people that are still doing that. One of them that I know, I can't say who it is, but you'll probably figure it out, donated a lot of money to the temple of the Vedic Planetarium. I mean, huge amount of money, over $1 million. And because this person was not recognized, above any other donor, this person stopped giving donations and made a declaration that they would never give money to this project again because there was no semblance of gratitude, no recognition of something extraordinary that happened. One time I was sitting in taking prasadam with one of these wealthy people, not someone who I had mentioned, but someone else. And the person that was serving prasadam didn't know that I was sitting with a very wealthy person. So he refused to serve me. He said, "You're not allowed to be in here. Go out." And then I took sides with this very wealthy man, and I said, "Okay, then I'm going too." And then he finally, at the end of the talk, at the end of the confrontation, of the argument, he let the man stay. It was a man, and have prasadam there. So that's good use of Krishna's money. And a lot of times, Krishna's wealth is used for good purposes, but most of the time, it's used for bad purposes. Even though Prabhupada went to the part of the world where money is mostly used for bad purposes, where there are skyscrapers, airplanes, advanced medicine, and so forth and so on, and powerful weapons for mass destruction. Prabhupada knew that this could be also somehow engaged in the service of Krishna. And Prabhupada was, when this Govinda recording came out, Prabhupada first heard it on a very small, portable, battery-powered record player, but he never heard it on the big speakers. So it was played for him. The devotees decided, okay, let Prabhupada, if he wants to hear it, we'll play it on the big speakers. They didn't want to do it because it had a female voice leading the kirtan. But anyway, Prabhupada listened, and it was right at the time of his Vyasa Puja. And he had greeted the deities, he had taken his seat on the Vyasasana, and they were singing Shri Guru Charana Padma. And Prabhupada didn't say a word, because this record was being played at the time when they were usually singing. And he didn't say a word, and all eyes were on him because they wanted to see how he would react. And he liked it. At the end of the conversation, at the end of the recording that lasted about 6 minutes, they saw tears streaming down his face. And at the end of the recording, Prabhupada said, now this should be played in every temple all over the world. And that's being done even now. So, and then, although he had come to a very sinister and proud part of the world to spread Krishna consciousness, it had proved successful. And now Krishna consciousness is all over the world. It's not just in New York where it started, but in England and all the European countries and some African countries, some Malaysian, East Indian Malaysian countries around there, and all over the world. So it has become very successful, even though it started in a very ominous and proud part of the world. But Rajarshis like Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Pariksit, even though they sometimes had to do violence and punish people, they were doing it for the purpose of protection. So they were, and they really loved their subjects, and the subjects loved them. So even though they were doing sometimes things that were abominable, they were respected. And so this was a very common thing in days of yore. It's very difficult to find political leaders who who love their subjects. I recall that there was a famous tennis professional who has departed, unfortunately, and he every time people applied for membership in his organization, he asked them two questions. First question, what do you like to do best? Second question, what are you best at doing? And as a result, his organization became one of the most popular tennis professional companies in the world. So this is one of the things that Prabhupada liked about America, because even though it was a very wealthy country, there were a lot of people who were disappointed. They didn't want to follow along the same path that their parents and their grandparents followed. They were looking for something else. And Prabhupada kind of didn't know this, but when he started his movement, the people who came were young. They were descendants of people who were very wealthy, and they were searching for something more to life than what they were accustomed to. So these are some of the reasons, and I'll read the verse again because it's about this. The Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king. Although absorbed in material happiness, he was not dragged to the lowest of life, for he always enjoyed his material happiness in a Krishna-conscious atmosphere. And then in the purport, Prabhupada says that Krishna consciousness movement can give the people in general the best opportunity to utilize their human life in the midst of material enjoyment. Krishna consciousness does not stop them in their propensity for material enjoyment, but simply regulates their habits of life of sense enjoyment. So even though most of Prabhupada's followers came from very well-to-do families, they used whatever wealth they had or whatever talents they had in the service of Krishna. And that is one of the things that everybody seemed to like about Prabhupada the most, is he showed them how to engage what they liked to do and what they could do best in the service of God. There was even one devotee who was good at mechanics, so he was repairing people's automobiles, and he became very well known for being expert in that mood. And there were other people who were painters, who were dancers, who were singers, who engaged their service in the service of the Lord. And that recording of Govinda cost a lot of money. It was arranged, parts were written out for harp, for cello, for flute, for violas, and orchestral bells. And Prabhupada liked the fact that, and for the studio, there was a large payment that had to be made for the use of the studio, which was ended up being several hours and over a period of several weeks. But Prabhupada liked it because the wealth had been engaged in the service of God. So that's the end of my talk today. Is any comments or questions anyone wants to make? You can ask them. It doesn't have to be about this. It can be about anything. Yes?
Just when you were discussing the devious behaviour of the politicians.
The what?
The devious behaviour of the politicians. There's a word for what they do. It's called double speak.
Double speak, I see.
Look it up. It means whatever they say before what they mean. So they spin you a whole load of rubbish, but then they say what they mean at the end of it. So you've got to disregard everything that's said at the start, and that's what they play on. That's how they draw people in. We're going blah blah blah. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. There's thousands and thousands of doctors that think this, but we can't find one doctor that will think that. You know what I mean? At the end, so they sort of buffer you to start with, and then they say what they mean at the end, where your consciousness is all thinking about what they've said. So you're confused about what they've said, or you're thinking about what they've said, and then they say what they actually mean at the end. So no one listens to that bit. That's the trick.
From what I know, it's not only people involved in the political machines that do this, but even in various industries, private industries. I read an article in a British newspaper that said that over £1 billion was spent every year for unnecessary operations, physical operations, where people were told that part of their body had to be removed, and it really didn't have to be. It could have been cured without any big expense or with any operating in the medicinal hospitalization theater. So, but anyways, I think that Srimad Bhagavatam class is not a place to condemn the material world, because there are a lot of good things that we can get from the material world. That's what Prabhupada did. He took the material, and he told the story about how, it's not exactly related to this, but about how you shouldn't interfere with something that you don't know, to do what you have to do what you know how to do, and to do it best. And the story he told about this was about a woodworker. One of the things this woodworker did was to cut logs in half or in fourths or whatever. And it was such a hot day where he was working that he decided he wouldn't cut the whole log. He would just do half of it and then put a wedge in there so he'd know where he left off. And when he came back the next day, he would take the wedge out and continue. So somehow or other, a rhesus monkey, those are the mischievous monkeys that we sometimes hear about, got into his place after the man had left and started playing around with the wedge, not knowing what it was, and just, doing his monkey business. I mean, it could have been a female monkey, but anyway, I was saying monkey business. And so the monkey pulled the wedge out and didn't realize that his tail was caught when the log snapped back together. And he died. He just died because there was no food and nowhere to go. And so that was the story that Prabhupada said, don't do anything that you don't know anything about. Don't mess around. So I'll end with that. Any other comments? That's, by the way, that incident is recorded somewhere. I read about it. I didn't just make it up or hear it. It's an actual incident that Prabhupada talked about. So any other comments or questions? Yes?
Thanks, Maharaj. You were mentioning in the beginning how Srila Prabhupada was asked, why did it take so long for him to actually fulfill the mission of going to the West, when he was asked by Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, the question was, the microphone stopped working on his microphone. Why Prabhupada thought about it, why it took so long for him to preach in the West, and why he went to the United States. And his answer was that, well, it was a very difficult task, and therefore I had to think about it. So I'm just kind of speculating, but I think that Prabhupada was, because he was a very intelligent person materially as well as spiritually, his idea was that if the Americans did something, the rest of the world would follow, which they were already starting to do. So he calculated that if they started to follow Krishna consciousness, it would be possible for the rest of the world to follow as well, because they weren't following. They weren't following in his place of birth. They weren't following in any place. And what he speculated and what he thought was proved to be true, that it started in the United States, and then gradually it became popular all over the world. So, I mean, one could probably talk about this for several hours or days or lifetimes, but that's my understanding of what happened. Any others? Yes?
How can we ensure that our material happiness is always enjoyed in a Krishna conscious atmosphere?
We can't. He asked how can we always know that our wealth is enjoyed in a Krishna conscious atmosphere? We can't. If we see a new car, we want to buy it. If we see a beautiful woman, we want to make her our wives or our concubines or whatever. If we see a beautiful place in the world, we want to live there. If we see a beautiful palace, we want to make our house like that. So there's a great struggle that always is existing between the devotees of Krishna and Maya itself. Maya is always trying to get us to get a better, bigger house. And Krishna is saying, well, we don't need that. We can sleep on the floor. We don't need furniture. We can be very happy without all that sort of stuff. So there's no special secret except to associate with devotees and to read the philosophy of Krishna consciousness on a regular basis. That will help us. But there's no guarantee that Maya might not be successful. And it's happened in the past several times. There's a dark history to everything, including stuff in Krishna consciousness that happened. I lived through many of these dark moments, including murders. But now it's very uncommon.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
How do we find the line between asceticism and what we really need? So when it comes to...
Well, chanting Hare Krishna in a temple is a form of asceticism. It's a form of enjoyment, but it's also a form of asceticism. It's a form of enjoyment in its music, it's dancing, it's good food, it's good people that are friendly. So that is a form of asceticism. But when we're using the same things, music, if we buy the latest songs or we're walking down the main street and we hear music being played out of a music store that we sort of like, but it's played by some popular singer or something like that, that is false asceticism. That's the kind of asceticism that we don't want. And people that are heads of corporations sometimes get up early in the morning and start writing notes to themselves. That is a form of asceticism. But it's a form of asceticism to gain material wealth, to gain fame, to gain notoriety, to gain a prominent position over one's competitors. So that's what the kind of asceticism that we don't want to engage in. And just to study in a university is a form of asceticism. To read books that we don't like to read, we have to read them because when we have to write our papers, master's degrees and PhDs and bachelor degrees, we have to write them. We don't like to study to do it. That form of asceticism is not the kind of asceticism that we aspire to. But the kind of asceticism we do aspire to, is to be where you are. We're in temples, we're with devotees. That kind of asceticism is Krishna conscious. So that's where the line can be drawn. I don't know how helpful that is, but anyway, that's the comment.
Maybe more on like material things such as a bed, sleeping on the floor, eating, like shelter is a basic need. Can you speak on maybe...
Prabhupada once shocked the landlord in 26 2nd Avenue by saying, when the landlord said, "Where's your furniture?" And he said, "Well, we don't need furniture. We can sleep on the floor. We can sleep on a mat." But that's real asceticism. I mean, we don't regard it as tapasya or penance. It's just natural. Because why do we need a bed when we can sleep on a mat on the floor? Why do we need someone beautiful to be married to when we can marry anyone who's reasonably intelligent or who we have a rapport with? So real asceticism is what we're doing here right now, and we're listening to the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. That's a form of asceticism. Why are we sitting down on the floor without chairs? I mean, some are sitting in chairs, but most of us are not with chair, and that's a form of asceticism that we should embrace.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll end there. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.